Bobla, it's Sewang. I can see you. Probably.
Oh, hi. Oh, there's Namyela. Hello.
Okay.
Tewangla. Hello, Tewangla. How are you?
Okay, I'm going to quickly introduce. I mean, both of you.
Please do. Please do. Okay.
So,
Good. Yes, please.
welcome everyone.
Yes.
My name is Sewang. Tashla, it's fine, no? Okay. My name is Sewang Namgyal. I've been a long-term friend of Tibet House and a friend of Bob. I serve on the board of the Tibet Fund and also chair of Reimagining Doogling Tibetan Settlement in South India. We're very fortunate today to have two great thought leaders here share on a very esoteric and very deep subject. What I'm going to do is just going to read it directly because, and also share just a gist of their bios because it's, I mean, it's much I can say on both of them. The topic, in a sense, what they'll be discussing is about the formation of the subtle body and mind through the Vajrayana teachings. So that, and they'll elaborate more details on that. Bob Thurman is the president and founder of the Tibet House US. Bobla was named by the New York Times as the leading American expert on Tibetan Buddhism and was awarded the prestigious Padma Shri Award in 2020 for his help in recovering India's ancient Buddhist heritage. Time magazine chose him as one of the 25 most influential Americans in 1997.
No, don't take it seriously.
Geshe Longpa Lobsang Nyandala was born in 1970 in Amdo region of Tibet. Geshe-la ordained right after completing his high school and completed his Buddhist studies at Rongpo, Gongchen, Repkong in Amdo in 1997. Geshe-la escaped occupied Tibet in 2001 and joined Sarajaya Monastery in South India. And there he received the Geshe Laramba degree, which is an equivalent to a PhD in philosophy and religion in 2011 and completed his tantric studies in 2013. Currently, he is one of the main editors at the Center for Compilation and Editing of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's writings and discourses in India, while working on his PhD at the Dalai Lama Institute for Higher Education in Bangalore, South India. So we are equally fortunate to have Tenzin Gyaltsab to serve as the interpreter. And you may not be aware that in Tibet, translators are considered, are held in great esteem. They're known as Lotsa was. And we're so fortunate that Gyaltsab is here to make these insights accessible to all of us. Tenzin Gyaltsab was born in Lhasa City. Right now, he's a senior specialist at the Himalayan Art and Culture at the Rubin Museum. He used to work at Trace Foundation as a program officer for 20 years. He earned bachelor's degree at Oxford Brookes University and his master's in management from New York School. So just from a scheduling standpoint, we're really fortunate to have from 7 to 8 a discussion, a conversation between Geshe-la and Bobla. And then following that, from 8 to 8:30, we could have a Q&A. Yeah. And perhaps, Bobla, should I request Geshe-la to make a few opening remarks and then we could have this conversation with the two of you? So with that.
I'm Geshe-la, go first.
Go ahead.
I just want to say, if I could say, Tewangla, I would just like to introduce you to the people. Tewangla, I would like to introduce you to the people. Tewangla is a spiritual banker, and he's a spiritual person, and he's the leader of a group on the Durguling, which is a Mundgod in Karnataka state in India, where he grew up. And he has led the movement to try to bring that place up to standards of the 21st century, and he's really done a wonderful job at doing that. So I'm very honored that he's there in Tibet House introducing this event. And I didn't realize that Tewangla himself is interested in the subtle body of the Tantra, that I didn't realize.
Thank you, Bobla. Thank you for your
I just wanted to mention, just to introduce you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Now, please go ahead, Geshe-la, about the subtle body. I also want to apologize. I want to apologize for not being there in person. I became confused. I'm 81 years of age, and I became confused, and somehow I thought it wasn't happening today, so I didn't drive down. I'm about 3 hours north of New York, and I did not drive down today because I got confused. And that's my fault. And I'm very happy to be able to be here electronically with Geshe-la's presence. Okay, so now that's all I wanted to say.
Ani tatira de aripo khang nangla ani lobanchemo tamancho misa pedo tajajuni pendo tuji chese shuga in la be gabo chong tinang shin tatangi ngasupo khangi genze gaden la jashong ani kamo tu su chong ani ten de be gabo chong tinang shin tan du stin tenjer nang je go kapten na wat so tuche chen nang sen shuya chi ta ani chang su ani ji mi mong bo chin du stin ni di zo za chen bu ti dang je je ani de dam shen de pe sha den de ni sta ga bu chong ani nga ta ja ga ni du stin ta ri ni sim ji ki nga jo shi dang de wi ta tam she danda Virginia University je de na shin Columbia je ani Harvard je ani PYCC den di ji ni ani a ji nang ge tabchen ka kashi la ko je je ani du stin ni 방이 심지그 조시기 차시 두스진 모토지아다 아니 저와 들린지니 삼슬레야게 그거 좀다 다른 두스진이 얼마 두스차데 요스.
So, thank you for Tibet House giving us this wonderful opportunity to be here, great event. And I wanted to thank Professor Thurman for joining us tonight's discussion. Really appreciate it. A few moments ago, I met Ganden Thurman. We had a really great in-depth discussion about the topic that I'm about to share with you tonight. And my particular purpose of the trip from India this time is really to meet the scholars and especially people engaging in these kind of profound topics, including the teachers, the scholars at Harvard, UVA, and Columbia. I had a great meetings with them, and we were basically having a frank exchange of how we see this very subtle and profound topic can be explored mutually, relying on our unique resources and expertise, try to really find more about this dream body and the subtle mind. And so this is, I think, one of the last leg of our trip, and we're happy and so happy to be with the professor. And especially, I wanted to thank you coming here. It's cold tonight, and you are very busy. But despite of all of these troubles, you made here, and very happy to see you.
Ni 심지 그 조시 그 뭐에 소디 맞아 시 차비치라 스포 라바데 가 차비치라 아니 강사지 니바지 요래 요 말레스 아니 강사 니바티 요나 요리 요탄데 간데레스 제 당이 뭐에 소디 아니 도드나 아니 강사라 차라지 제 아니 강사 참무디 파샤 트비야기 폼바라 방가 차비치라 alongsim chamuzan la teni tabi dachi sha thuyaki muiti singi yos kanisena dindi ge alongsim chamuzan la teni tabi dachi sha thusona ani jiwashima darhan ki tukidos di dunda la ani amlam ki li sayagi ani ji garsugunere 심지그 조시 서와지 랑지 다 디토니 amlam ki nanger sa ti tiang sheshi zo yins.
So my focus of the research for my studies is to investigate if there are the subtle body and mind, or the consciousness, when we depart our physical body. Because I'm very interested to looking at what happens to us once we leave our body behind. And I wanted to explore if there is any entity, you call it either subtle body or subtle person. Once you're able to establish through this, according to some of the Vajrayana theories and studies, and then this will really enable us to provide a ground for discussion regarding rebirth and reincarnation. And so this is my kind of a larger focus of the research, and to really demonstrate that there is a subtle body or subtle person, having left the gross level of a physical body, we have to come up with some kind of intermediate, if you like, the connectors between this life and the next life. I feel that doing research on the dream body, which is relying on the subtle consciousness and energy, and through exploring how this dream body is constructed, and through looking at the functions and the role of the dream body, which may lead us to understand how the subtle consciousness with the subtle energy transmit from body or this body to the future body. So that's the kind of a broad area I'm trying to cover in my research.
제장이 다시 심지마 지용디 심지기 이차디 조 자가기 디르 니바능라 시험비 루드기 로마 팍발하기 죄뒤 당 디긴 자완 제셰카 당 데니 마 지네 아니 나루 치트이 당 데나 신기 지름 붙이기 아니 ngram chemo 당 롱아 세드은 당 롱아 덴조 드주시 샤제제 아니 심지지기 US.
So to do this research, I'm right now relying on some of the Indian classical resources, stretching back to the 2nd century, the disciple of the Nagarjuna, the Aryadeva. Aryadeva, in his text, Judu Dhyame, the lamp for the abbreviation of the Acharya practices, which really explained some of this movement of the subtle consciousness and the body, the energy. Also, I started looking at the 6 yogas of the Naropa, the great Nalanda Pandita. And also, I relied on the Lama Tsongkhapa's various texts on the Tantric teachings, including the path to the treatise on the Tantric stages, as well as looking at the 5 stages of the Guya Samaja and the abbreviated and experiential instruction of the 5 stages, how to accomplish the practices of the 5 stages. So relying on some of these classical resources for my research.
저당 산리기 돈이 이니 지금 롱심 차라근도 땅데 다다지 단디 차라다 심지기 이사지 차대어를 마도 라트바지 용구요 말이데 이네 니 다른바 담보데 종리기 돈이 가리 숨고도 하쇼기 종리기 돈이 가리 숨고도 라랭 가리 지도 라랭기 돈이 냠뇽 지위 이네 미나 가리 정도디 아니 모토치 제이스.
And so to investigate this nature of the subtle consciousness and the body, I'm also kind of relying some of the scientifically, scientifically interested or the inquiry based studies. But unfortunately, right now, among the Western scientists, this research on the subtle nature of the consciousness and body is a very elementary. There isn't any concrete samples and materials to demonstrate. So with that limitation, what I started doing is to looking at the exploring on the various theories of a subtle body, mind, and then looking at the practices, the different instructions given to accomplish this subtle body in the mind, and then maybe perhaps looking at some of the samples, the people who have been practicing these instructions according to the Vajrayana teachings, and where we can share some of their outcomes.
제가 당보디 더 리차라 리심 차라건 루탄 데지 셰고도스 리심 차라건 루탄 셰온데 리디라 아니 락바당 차와당 신데 차와 심지니 루고요레스 숑레가 상라가당라 리 락바데 아니 단다 통신비 아니 스부디 차가요레스 차와데 디 능로게 자당 롱당 틀리심디 차가요레스 신데 차와데 아니 지우 폐와 지위 세등 시위 생원도 주비 아니 탐지 동바 어세지 준비하롱 참모데 아니 리 참모데라 샤가요레스 지위 세등 시위 클라마 동원도 주기면도 알
And so when we talk about the bodies, whether it's a coarse or the gross level and the subtle level, according to the Buddhist explanation, as they divide our body and mind into three types or stages, where you have a gross level of body and mind, which is for us, the physical, the aggregates, the bone, flesh, and the senses. This is considered as a gross body and mind. Then the subtle one, which is primarily talking about the channels, the chakras, and the drops. These are the subtle nature of the element. And then the very subtle, the extremely subtle level of the body, which we only experience during our birth, or in birth and in our the death, in which, especially during the dying the part of the experiences, when our gross level of the physical and the mental aggregates are dissolved, and we are purely relying on the subtle energy and the subtle consciousness, and they're so subtle that they're not separable between the two, and that's considered as the body and the mind.
이능신 심라용 차라지니 아강부기 시와디 시와 라발라샤니 아니 뇨몽등 근토 제치당 그래서 아니 셈 차와당 신데 차와디 동바시기 롱기다 롱라 쉬엄비 셈 차모디 셈 차모라 샤가요레스.
And also for our mind, when we again go over this, there are three types of nature of our mind at a gross level, which is the general, the sensory experiences for the mind, gross level of the mind. And the subtle level of the mind is emotions, the afflictions. These are considered the subtle level of the mind. And then the extreme or the very subtle level of the mind is only experienced when we have dissolved all the gross and the subtle level, and experiencing this incredibly subtle the combination of the subtle consciousness and the subtle energy, which is riding the subtle energy, the consciousness is riding this energy or relying on this as a vehicle. And this is considered the most subtle body and mind.
제장가다 나수 당티기 찬리기 심지기 차시디 아니 리르바다 세미르바다라 데데요레스 숑리게 나가모기 아니 샤쇼게 숑리게나니 리 차모도 심데 차모도 셈 차모도 셈 신데 차모 디콜라 마라 심지기 제제 아니 디콜라 심지기 차위게 제노지레스.
The differences between the Western and the Eastern approach is Western scientists who are pretty much kind of limited from the kind of physical, the physical experiences, and they're not able to go beyond that. Whereas the Eastern, the spiritual practitioners and so on, they continued their exploration and they reached to where they can really experience incredible, the subtle nature of our body and mind, and they're able to also explain that. Whereas the Western, the scientists are only at a kind of a material level. They're able to explain and they are not able to go into the subtle experiences.
接着，龙心新的차와디는 대화요레스, 차와디 르바디는 대화요레스. 비샤나龙心 참무 잠라 니위 nenjurwatin지 종차리 지라 곤투게 롱 참무디 셈 참무디 롱 참무지라 니데바디 디 왕기 그 봉보디 냥바차야단 당예야라 수파 메비토니 니마 지장 뉴시두스데 투야기니 당지 용거레스.
So when you look at the Eastern tradition, where the yogis or the practitioners are able to control this very subtle body and mind, with these, through the practices and through the yogas, manipulating or utilizing these subtle energies and still sustain some sort of energy. One of the way that we are now being able to observe this experience is when the practitioners, the advanced yogi practitioners passed away, even for a couple of days or even a fortnight, their body is still able to preserve a certain level of freshness and air. As a result, it doesn't decay because there's a clear evidence, a very subtle nature of that entities in that body. So you can see that the practitioners are able to utilize this very subtle nature of body and mind through a proper training and practices.
这张电地龙心参谋跟着当地地了电比里地了，那是用力可能了，他把度个里当，木兰个里当，安尼就上地比距离当，这些个有钱很久当，电车跟家里当，政府个东西了，说把他里参谋跟着当嘛不就送过来是。
So according to the Vajrayana teachings, when they are defining the most subtle body and mind, you refer to the teachings, especially in the unexcelled Tantra practices. The completion stage of that practices include the Yamantaka, the Guyasamaja and Chakrasamba are each using different terms, but referring to this entity, the very subtle body and mind, which is composed with a very subtle consciousness and the subtle energy. And so you find how these are utilized. As you know, for the practitioner, you tend to look into the advanced completion stage teachings.
用钱么个些吧，就是他等我是都是现在古马来的，我是北村是理性参谋了，但你大别大些下下的，没那么个难教个托呢，我说我这边呢，没那么个理解就用过来是，等我是长马来用个要张地图呢，然这样意思。
So to demonstrate the entity, very subtle body and mind, if we rely on these advanced studies, it's very complex, and maybe some of us may not be able to access to this knowledge. So I thought the best way to illustrate this subtle entity, maybe relying on our dream experience. Through this dream, we are able to produce, if you like, an entity which is separate from our ordinary experiences in the dream. And that dream also relies on a body. We call this the body of the dream or dream body. And through really clearly explaining this process, we may able to be access to some of the discussion that I'm mentioning earlier.
Chestang azo mi phewa la yongbi ta melam ki li sa de yelu tokpa la nangwe nangcha zam chi res. Nangcha zam ki ani melam mapapo ki li tili ani melam ki li niwa chi loksa che ni ani satarang bon ro tu ge yare didi ki chora na cho chi nyoya la so pata tinji ki ni che chonga ti chestang ki melam ki li phewa chi res. Ta yina ya melam ki li chapar chen sa chi yong go res. Malam ki li chabar chen sa ti pongbo nyangba te sha ni ani tsur lo su tuen che ani malam ki li chi tuen tu go yore ti along sim chamu zam ki nyalen ji wala teni ani malam ki li chi yong res.
So when we talk about the dream body, we can also see two different types of a dream body. One is the ordinary dream body, in which this dream and the dream body appears to us through a vision and an experience of a vision with a certain discriminative thinkings or the cognitions. This is an ordinary dream that we're all experiencing. What I'm interested here is looking at there's also a very unique dream body. This unique dream body, how do we produce these? Is basically the dreamer can totally create another entity or identity, totally separate from your current body, at experiential level, where you're totally separated from your current body, but then still create an identity and entity, relying on this subtle nature of the body and mind, and you're able to do things. So this is what I'm most interested for my research.
Cheza di kola ani phapal hagi chodi gi nangla ani malam zantang da simsong yores ani malam de long tup chin zamba chiche dumba gi tup chin zamba che ani zanthap san zamba che ni malam zantang simsong yores.
In the Aryajiva's text on the Judu dream, the Lama abbreviated the charya or the conduct, in which he classified this, how do we conceive the dream, or how do we gain this insight into dream. He provided 3 clues. The first technique is through relying on the practice of the lung, the energy, one create this separate identity in your dream. Another instruction that he provided is through creating in very strong aspirations and a desire to have that dream. And with this influence of the desire, one is also able to produce the unique dream body. And the final technique that Ayadeva mentions was through relying on the instruction, the pithy instruction of the trained coaches or the instructors. One follow very specific gradual steps, the practicing steps, and through that you're able to realize that dream body.
Tati nang ni along tup chin zamba sayate ngasu along rakpa ti pha thun chi che ani along chamu la marapa along chamu de ma pa ni shin de chamu gang la pa yong di ani along de chama roma tang changma ni la di che ro chang ni ga along de along uma la tsuba ina ani along sim shin de chamu ji cha yong go res ani tinji ge along sim chamu de gi nyalen chi ni ani amalam ge li nywa chi thoya chi yong go res. Ta pisha na tinjin rawo go piti pena jangjaro bi doji tabela chomba ina gonglo ya myon di ani chengis ge wa mares chengi maze di kawla ani along tuji ani malam chi li chi sinje ani jong chemo ge shita tang ya la sopa tinji malam ge li ni ba ji ge shita tang ge yo ba tinji jangjaro doji ge nam than la song yo res ti tang ti tab ani ngama mambo chi along tuji malam ge li sane di thone ani 지 갈수는 다 템바던 주의 샤와지와 딘디 망보주요레스.
So the first technique that Aryadeva introduced is actually there are records being used by some of the past masters. One clear example is the Changyal Rüber Doji, the second Changyal lineage Tulku. He is also the tutor to the Chinese emperor. So Changyal Rinpoche lost his sight. And as a result, he relied on this dream body produced through the unique the practices. Basically, the practitioners who are really relying on the practice of the lung or the energy, and through leading the energy, the lung. Normally, we are kind of our energies is remained on the left and the right. The channels, but he is through the formal training and practices really observing this energy at the central level, our duty, draining the energy from the left to the and the left channel and concentrating into the central channel, and through that he is able to really attain the very subtle body, and as further trainings, he is able to access to this extremely subtle nature of our body and mind. With that, then he produces a dream body. In his sleep, he uses this technique as produces a unique dream body, and with that, then he is able to do many things.
만동리 니바치 드르니 데비시 다당야 아니 데바당 로이 돈다 자바텐티 용고어레스 시지강 takali지와텐디.
So with that dream body, he is able to serve the Dharma and the Sangha. One example mentioned in his biography is that he had so many proving and editing works to do, but then he already lost his sight. And he is not able to do that with his ordinary physical conditions. So instead, he goes into these very subtle nature practices and produce the subtle nature dream body. And with that, he's able to continue his proving works and editing. So that's mentioned in his biography.
니바 덤바게 또게 아니 말람게 리슴바치 요레 티 파나 세베니 컵스 니 말람 데톤 데 타베치 미히인 시체 양다 삼로다 삼로다 니카 니 로칼라칼라 양 다랑 양다 삼로다체 아니 라미 맹글라 테니 양 말람 장당치 송고 요레스 딘디 지니온데 말람다 ng오시체 아니 두스지니 양 장당치 송고 요레스.
Another technique for achieving this dream body, the unique dream body, is through creating a very strong aspirations or desire, saying, I wanted to have this dream, this particular dream, and constantly really reminding yourself and clearly visioning that dream that you wanted to accomplish. And then with the help of the teacher's instruction, we are able to produce this dream body and able to achieve some of the desire that you said before you go to sleep.
The between the Upana Nazo Nivi Tizoganangla Bogi that Satik in Dunya Chemo Amalati Ani Nima density like Ni Kuje, Ani Kugu Malamgili Nibachi Lanche, Nima densila Sajakasa Kavala Chi, Mi Kasa Kavala Tu, Ani Likan Dramanda Cheche, Ani say on the Aninga Sajan Detan de la Chimba in De la Tuba and Rin Denda Wichindu, Chi Denda Wichidus, share on the Kalaku, Drew Mayung Sagi, Sajatin Mingda, Sajatin Baratoba Jungyoris, and Jonig Amala, and the Tatu, and the Jorm Chikal, rather than the Kundachikal, Kundula Tishuk and the Yang Sunguduas.
So the example for this dream body produced through your aspiration is the recent example was one of the assistant to His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, the Taju Zhuanyi. the family name is Chaju. His mother, sometimes she would go to sleep for 7 days. And during those days, she would go around, traveling around different places. She's seeing mountains, lakes, arriving in different locations. And then she remembers those areas that she, in physical level, never been before. And then she come back from the dream and reporting this to her, family members. And she's very specific about the name of the mountains, the lakes, the regions. Later, people travel, according to her guidance, go to these areas, and they're able to prove that the things that were actually able to find the concrete location. So this is one example of producing dream with a strong aspiration. Embody, sorry.
Sumbati Zentauke Malam Sayati, Ani Lama Malam la Jamba Sombi Lama Tinchigi, Ani Loma Zadang, Lungin Jotan Tinti, Mandawa Yodeni, Mila, Rateji, Ani Kala Katila, Ani Chara Malam Tangitu, Malam Ande Tangore Sije, Ani the Macho Betonima, Gay Chunje, Ani Gansamjini, Ni Kuni, Malam Tangayo Bikabla, Ani Ni Deni Digayang. Amala imba ngoshi ni matroba chi chakayores lami rateji chimba ina chimba tintigi yang ni tangchi yongores zentab spa ni malamia tinti.
So the third technique to achieve a dream body is relying on the pithy instruction of gurus. That's called this a forceful formation of the dream body through relying to your gurus. This process is basically the advanced practitioners or the teachers who first really observe the condition of the student, really analyzing what is their chakra like and their channels like. And through deep understanding about the condition of the chakras and channels and drops in the student body, and he instructs them to go to sleep. And then once the disciple went to sleep, and then the Lama using very the low volumes of the vocal product, the sound, and is instructing the student how to achieve the dream body. So while the disciple is in sleep, but through his kind of technique of building the dream body, he's able to hear the instruction. And having heard the instruction, he achieved the dream body. And then once he achieved the dream body, Lama still continue instructing him to carry on certain activities. And the student is able to do that without awake or without awakening. So this is the another technique of achieving dream body.
In Lama Chabar Jempena, Galur Mushi, come degila shuti kabla chungdi. Ani lama zuga tindi chini, ani malam chabar chimi ya tindi yang jawar muchila shushas. Zentab sa malam ta ngu shiwa cheche, malam ta ngu shiwa di thone, ani temba tangdui shawa che tindi yang chongshas. Galur muchi.
Example for these was reported to His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama by Kalu Rinpoche, the previous Kalu Rinpoche. Kalu Rinpoche's some of colleagues were relying on this technique to really do many services to the Dharma through achieving the dream body and continue to serve the well-beings of the sentient being and the Dharma. This is reported to His Holiness.
Zu korparata malam tango shiwa jongdar di ani tanda along tubjin zambatang dambi tubjin zambatang zentab san zamba kari yinaya malam sim tsari jila te jambaji gores jambaji di kalan jiktembi jambaji tang chitang jiktenlin devi jambaji tang nindos jiktembi jambaji tang te malam tango shi tsari jila malam ani macho betone malam mizent ani karchi goresana ani chi susugi liti mela traya tang Shula yuya tang, ayangla chungya la sopa, gatse chike depo tangya tene, mambo chik jiwa yinaya, ayni choko yuwa ma res. Di jiyonde ta li te jongdar shio chik choko res. Di jiyonde, ani di tabi li te sin tu sona, ani li tembo chika yinsa, ta li di toni tensi ka shawa mambo chik chik tiko yuwa res. Amalam gili korang rwa ta. Mita tang, amalam gili chabar chen ti rwa. No. Di ma re la.
So when you practice and really sharpen your skill to achieve the dream body and excel in that experiences, there are many instructions are giving. But you can divide this into two categories. One is the worldly practices, another is beyond worldly practices. So for the worldly practices of sharpening your dream body function is once you achieve the dream body, once you're able to identify your dream body, which is separate from your physical, and then the practitioners really understand that you're dreaming, that this dream body is separate from your physical body, and you jumping into rivers or falling from steep cliffs, sometimes burning your dream body, and doing this kind of practices, you're still not able to. You're not disturbed and awakened, and you continue sustaining that dream experiences. So this is how they practice, by really visualizing that you're falling into huge kind of steep valleys, or this dream body is being burned in the fire. And as you produce these three imagination, and still you're not awake, this is how they sharpen. This is called the worldly techniques.
제가 당이 뒤엔체라 dom지잡이 아니 가서다 아말람 딘지 아말람 잔탕 심지네 딘지가 말람 심비 토네다 말람게 리 참무지 심바이나 디타비 말람게 리 참무 심비 토네 말람게 리 디기 딱비 강사 참무지 샤트게도 아스 디 아니 알롱심 참무근 로탄치 촌셰게 비리스 제정가 딘진자고 토네 아니 강사 때라 강사 라바지던 차와지던 신의 차와슴 드트기도 있어.
So the point the result that I'm looking for is through establishing a dream body, which is separate from our gross level of body. When you're able to establish dream body in mind, then you're able to produce a subtle self. So right now we have this gross level of self that we all experience through this flesh body and mind. But once you're able to identify and practice the dream body, then that becomes the subtle self. And with that subtle self, and you go further through practicing and advanced practicing, being able to manipulate your very subtle self, through that, then we can connect to this huge topic about how we engage in the rebirth, how when our physical gross level of body, when we leave that, and then entered into, with the very subtle, go into the next life. So this will be then much better connector between this life and the next life. So that's the kind of area I'm interested.
제장다 디엔체라 아니 리심 차르크 남샤지기 쉬요 디기 촌던데 디나니장 알롱심 참무고 조탄데 지셰지 디 아말람게 리기 토니 셰탄데 주기도에스 소분체무 아니 콘 테멜라 아니 디 셰탄데 주기도에 공공스카리오나 디지 송로나.
So with that, I have a question for Professor Thurman. So what I'm trying to do here is to establish a subtle body in the mind, or subtle identity, the self, through relying on the dream technique, this unique milam gulu. And my purpose is really to connect between this inner body and the future, if you like, the birth, through using this kind of theories and practices and I would like to receive your feedback on that.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much, Kisala. That's really wonderful. A surprising, brilliant, wonderful exposition by the Geshe-la. Recently, Geshe-la, I have been reading aloud the Do Pel Chen, the Abhitamsaka Sutra, and in English translation. And in that, journey of the Sudana, who is, what is that? That's Sangbo Khatsa Sudana, the young man who visits 53 different Kalyana Mitra. So he 53 different Gewe Shenyen. So I just wanted to, first thing I wanted to say is that the Gewe Shenyen degree that, for example, you are the example of, this is the image of the teacher in the Mahayana Buddhism. And it is so wonderful to meet you and to attend you. And it means the Kalyana Mitra means a spiritual friend. And this is sort of almost better than a guru. And even in Tantra, Vajradhara, Toji Chang, he says he will appear to people in the form of the Kalyana Mitra, the Gewe Shenyen. So we're very honored to have you giving this wonderful talk. Should I stop? I forgot
Sure,
your
sure.
name, translator.
Thank you.
Should I
I'll
stop?
quickly translate to Geshe-la. Nye dina malam nyam kunzu kuwa man dina shunu. Geshe-la liya toji chi shuya yins. Ane di nyesha nga tanda do pechin dawu yus. Geshe-la sengidu. Do pechin dewa na liya dina liya tanda jajumba suchana sa tanya di chi di jajumba tanda jajumba jik tsenri.
Sudana, his name, the young bodhisattva, Sudana. Gewe Shenyen, Zeyate.
Shunye di kongi da gewe shenye ngabchulaks tenyo res. Angkurangi gewe shenye dina mangu tenbe gobliya, ane gewe shenye kaji da nganzu namgyu sangye go doda tende na sumbe na liya, khares na da lama dozogi, ane chigi jubat namen na zol tenche lomal liya che sunye jorwa. Chigi da jube dina liya da kanzu lugu jubat namen na zol tenche lomal liya penda go res.
And then the second, I so much appreciate your connecting this discussion with the Kewa Ngachi Droba idea, which you did, the proof of the continuity of lives, of former and future lives, because it is so important. Nowadays in the West, people are waking up to the fact that the materialism where people identify themselves as only the coarse body and mind in this one life, and they're coming from nothing and they're going back to nothing. Therefore, the whole life is dandameba, completely pointless. And this is creating what they call a crisis of meaning, that people are very much in an epidemic of depression, that people are very depressed in the Western materialist society, or even Eastern too, for that matter nowadays, because they have lost the reality of everybody coming from previous life, going to future life, and the purpose of this life is to improve what kind of person you are, so you can have a better future life, at least minimally, and of course, if possible, become enlightened and have a really good one. So I really appreciate how you put the discussion of the subtle body in the context of the gaining greater familiarity with the former and future life reality.
Ani Geshe-la ge ta khong ya milam gi lu tinde ge namsha ji tone ta zo de gyawang ge chu ya ya bezu nam dos indi ga ba shib ji chungs ti kharesin dang ang nu jo na ya ji ge choe tingin da tinde mang bu shib ji che ani ji ge long ju da tinde be bu shib ji ori inele ta mi mang bu ji ge tande phung bu ji sha cha su no 가바도 보면 교는 마시는 것도 잠바도 민망부지게 메질이야 닝고매 같은 거를 또 그냥 갈래 갭갭 세세 퉁퉁 타마타마데 시사스는 개개민도 근데 지도 잠바지 딱 북섬 중국 tinde기 소소 되니체 얼로 tin데 멀레고도 잠바 민망부지야 따지 이무분 나자 지금 로범 중에다 이무 나트는 뭔고 용거리 디인도 잠바 지금 메제나리아 쳇딜리아 이내레 지 가소레 먼저 닝부치 라야 지금 안주 쳇도전에 디주고네 세네 아니 지금 낙토민 주야 뭐인바 소소지기 류드심니 배주야고 담비는 마음번을려데 딜릴 학배 땅안도 상계 고바 디메비네레 지금 단들레 달렉지치우에 개와틴데 리안 유지 학업이는 학바도 만도 류 참모들 기실라 단도 송도 류 참모들이야 땡치지 개와치면 된대 주야 질이야 혼자 세보다 된대 하고 사서는 민망부질이야 초알려 닝부치 니기를 선부도 당도 높지나 교치저데 초알 닝부매야데 참마탐데 시두디 개개민도 삼산중구도 디인데 기실라 단데 아니 심주다 갈롬나인데 즉 전대 됨지도스
So thank you for that. And then the next thing I wanted to mention is that these topics about the subtle body and the super subtle body mind and the subtle body mind, they traditionally were secret, esoteric, and not to be taught to the general public. And but His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, about 25 years ago, maybe a little more, in the early 90s, he decided that the Western people who are interested in Tibetan Buddhism already had a lot of wrong ideas about Tantra and about the secret topics, and completely incorrect ideas. So it was actually important as a matter of science to talk about all of these previously esoteric or secret things. And so I see Geshe-la, who is a graduate not only of the Serije, Nyingche Gompa, which I like very much, because I'm very especially fond of the Tamden Yangsang as my favorite, one of my favorite studies, although I'm very bad at it, but I like it very much. I had a really good dream about when I received the Tamden Yangsang first time from the former Serkho Rinpoche in Dalhousie at the Gyuto monastery there. I was so overwhelmed and I had such a nice dream, almost best dream. So I always like it. And then in Tibet, I went into the monastery and I touched the purba, special purba of the Yangsang. So I'm really fond of that. And anyway, so His Holiness, for example, I translated about 40 years ago, I translated mostly the Rimga Sedun, Jirimbaji Rimga Sedun, into English. And at that time, His Holiness suggested better not publish it. That was in 1980s. But then by the end of 1980s, around 1990, like that, he said, no, now you better publish it. So he changed his mind because it was important to share the subtle body, mind, and super subtle body, mind science, the Nangirikpa of those subjects, he felt. And I see Geshe-la agrees with that, and that makes me very happy. Thank you.
아니 니부대 주열이야 다 기실라가 다는 거랑도 류심 참모 소냐도 강로 제제도 저 먼저 상한다 저 와인도 좀 봐. 수균톤의 대비는 먼저디 상한체야지레스. 남규는 거랑도 상한디 걸이야 지기 출월이야 된저기 전에 먼거 지금 말이.但공司경부 쪽이 공신난다 제 배진도 로 니슈자란 정원에 아니디 누조리아 대해서 전에나 우주브레스. 이 고고조도 가려서는 눕조변나야 먼저 상한스니에 대해 권한 첨부지어랬어. 디인도 잠바지기 상한의 지당 상황제 현량 적초요 말을 때에 눕조변나야 망고지게 따지 그 상황인도 잠바 내주 임보다 뭐임보 망보주는 뭐 풍인 거라. 디인도 잠바 권한 망보여랬어. 디인도는 건설촌에다 디 뭐라도 되게 상황체냐 지금도 지금 세립도 좀 졸린 척도 체제 아니 간난 체제다 디리께서 상하조서 간이야도 졸리는 요리 행기실라가 딜리아다 가둠난지 대양하나도 상하다 저와이가 간이야 졸린 남지 가버시죠 디간에 지금라도 상하시에 인도점바 기실라 세르체네 세르체야 이담도지 담진 양상에서 남고만 단데 세원 천시름지 세원음지 등 국광면 내려 잘하우스리아 담진 양상 오한지 쉬위 인디 광무대 밀음 쉬지 야고 당주 안지게 문에 우리 메제나리 니름 약쇼 저 디관다데 당주 송도 다 지당하란 담진 양상 공례 냠년진의 야고 매들리 라메투르 덴제 지게 니름 야고 쉬지 덴데 담진 양상의 서치리아 믹스에 가난지스 근데 별이 친비 별이야도 좀봐 세르 분지에 탑소 가능하죠 덤비 양사 푸부도 별이여라 디지털 좀봐 다른 믹스에도 와도 슌디죠 근데 지금 베징 로 십주주 콘이야 예 단데 르무세주 인지나려도 저름 지금 단데 르무세루 인지나려 교르비 근데 교르베가 지동국에 개주나려 교르사소 공수처게 디 빠르게 알야 적재나무소 개주나 그돌려도 단데 내가 디파르마 gemni yago dos kana yan jema gujuna to ledi o ta dipar gemni yago dos cheche ani kamena mama ta khongsu chu ngarang zu desan nangbe cheri shudu samba nangbe cheri na ya dubji zo chi ta lusim chamo shindu chamo doje gang ya ta jolin u zu go ren de ya geshi la ga nyamshu nan je mutu de da jawa yub ya jolin nan de ya ari na ga ba shu chu geshi la to je chis
and for example nowadays the Western scientists are doing experiment in what they call neuroscience, where they're looking at the brain and trying to find out how to manipulate the brain and how the brain relates to the coarse consciousness's behavior. And in a way, you can say that the Zalung Tigle is really what they are looking at, but only with machinery, with external machinery, because they think the mind doesn't exist. They think it's just the brain. But the Za really is the central nervous system. The Lung is all the energy circulating in the central nerve, 10 Lung circulating in the central nervous system. And Tigle are what they call the neurotransmitters. And what they try to make drugs, they try to study what they are, serotonin, dopamine, this kind of thing. And they cortisol, oxytocin, and then they're trying to figure out how to make drugs to control the mind of people. But they have no idea that the yogi or the yogini of the Buddhist can create effects in the nervous system by mind, by putting the one-pointed mind on some particular point in the heart chakra, throat chakra, crown chakra, navel chakra, etc., by Nedunumba, for making a sort of Nedunumba of a focused mind, and that they can produce effects in the core, even in the coarse mind, as well as in the subtle mind. They have no idea about that, and that's what the Buddhist science can contribute to them gradually. In the future, as Geshe-la has dialogues with these neuroscientists, which we should be arranging that Geshe-la can do that, then in a way, Geshe-la is an inner science neuroscientist, we can say. Nangi lepe tsenipa, Geshe-la rangi. Okay, did you get that? I'm sorry, that's a lot of things.
Sure. 아니 단데 기실라 단데 디간이야 리심 차라고야 심주남에 그 연예디 슌두 중소 단도 눕죠나야 레베 왕저 요르바 진짜리야 심주치니에 빼망고 요르다 라바도 지기 나란조 남배슝네 제베는 코란조 저룬틱리디gel이야 심주친도 요르다 는 눕져버기 레베 왕저디 나란조 때는 단도 락버봐 다 콘조고 저룬틱리도 저 케링고 요마나 단데 미게 통고 요마래 이는 콘조고 레베 왕저스럽 주점바 디 고지다 집어줘봐. 딩가 남주 저luntil이다 뼈 잡아요레스. 다 딩도 좀 눕줘배 한데 레벨 왕조의 맨리 디제 지금 레벨 왕조를 규주체를 배준치고레스. 말한주 지금 nen저버 임비는 지금 권도를 딤체제 다시 저luntil이 어느 도시에 고여체제 롱습 참을 교화다야려 배준치고봐. 딩도 좀 조제다 롱 지금 우물야 야추인도 좀 봐. 아니 지금 내도 누버스 제제야 롱야 자 우물야 팀인도 좀 봐. 아니 지금 리슨 차라야 왕교 투야가 누버지 준제 텔리딘 제제 딱 리슨 참모 참모 제제 교화당 두고를 다 단도 누버변날에 디균일래 요 말이 디인도 좀 봐. 마음반에 지금 먼저 내 표하이네를 도와 졸림 고존이 누버베 레벨 왕者的 생리비로 한 대전용 뭐 기실라가 모티도 오스트레일리안 난제 다 기실라다 보이면은 낭배 아니 레벨 왕者다 기시 하람바 아니 기디오 dim노니 진짜 진도 삼바 디더보기 지금 내법도는 봐도 졸린 난 토비는 아니 펜도 휴지 용서레스.
Okay, good. And so then finally, about Geshe-la's discussion, it's completely fascinating about the dream, developing the dream body. And the way you did it is amazing. And is this from, you mentioned Aryadeva, and is this from Jundu Drame? Are you, when you're saying the three kinds of thing from Lung, from Mulam, and from the Labenjika, you know, Lameka, the Sumge tap, the dream body, Kia, and dream body. Was that from Jundu Drame or a different work by Pagbala?
Sure. Tengi Geshe-la tanda milumgi lu truptanda didang ranzu lusim charani ya yewache to shujigi 심주 야고도 라바도 단데 로벤 파블라게 주류 좀 장나서 다 밀음고 류주비알이야 탑시 숨
It was Jundu Drame.
탑시 숨부디 주류 좀에나네 손결에 양 로벤 파블라게 단데 슝양다나 손도스 단데 전더 롱데네 전더 저바 주류 좀에나 두게지
디레샤스티 겐락두스 카드나와 테넨가도스 강인스나 제르무치게 롱아 세드응기 나라 아니 말람기 담가 콩디 때용디 주라 세우요 마레스 타체샤스 레두그 송라 세우요 마레스 제세 타체도스 아니 다와자베 된세게 나라 디 말람기 다 담가 콩디 세우요 마레스 제 타체도스 다 가와요레스 디칼라 다 제르무치게 롱아 세드응기 나라 아니 Malamki Dambagi Kundi, Jodiginala Yores, Jodiginala, Java Simdang Chilen Simdos. Java Damboti Kardesana, Ani Malamki Liti Kandas Yungu Yores, and Java Chidos. Java Nivati, Malamki Li Langni, Pombo Nyambali Los Tunche, Pombo Nyamba Gala Yangcheri Yungati, Jitang Chen Kariri dos, Dichidos. Tene malamgi li ti pecho kawa dos che jwa simtisha ti len nang dos ta ti din rambu chila se khato men dos yina yang jeram chege rima se drung seba kor gugi khatila malam longkir charwi khathi tela ani ti seuji ni zo sha dos ta ti jwa sim ko ba jile se nangwa ta ti karin ka di himba ti sama seu dos.
Thank you so much, Professor Thurman. Your question is a very important question, and I see where you're also coming from. This is a great question for discussion. So where's my note now? You're right. When you talk about the dream body and the mind, although the Jerumuchi mentioned this in the 5 stage, the Rima said, the lamp for the 5 stage. Lama Tsongkhapa mentioned that when we talk about the dream body and the mind, in the Tantric, the text is not clear. Lama Tsongkhapa said, Nagarjuna didn't explain this very clearly. Dawa Thapa also didn't do a very good job of it. And then Lama Tsongkhapa continued to say, if you wanted to study the dream body and mind, the Aryadeva done the best job. If you look at Aryadeva's Judu, and where Aryadeva details each kind of the stage or the steps of the.
Yes.
So when I quickly start looking at Aryadeva's work, especially Judu Dharma. In that, Aryadeva has 3 questions and 3 answers. In that, his 3 questions were his kind of the parameter of the research were put into 3 forms of question. How does the dream body and mind establish? And when the dream body and mind established, later, how does this re-enter our physical body? And how do we utilize the dream body and mind? So these are the questions highlighted in the Aryadeva's text. And then later, I went back to Rimursechen, the Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on the 5th stage of the completion stage, and in which Lama Tsongkhapa, when he talks about the 9 mixings or the 9 integrations, he talks about the Longu, the enjoyment body, establishing the Longu, and in that section, and then Arjuna explains a certain amount of the dream body and mind.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. So, you know, the thing is that's so nice that in the Rinpoche also has a commentary on the Narochuduk. And among the Narochuduk, one of them is the Nilam Ku, Nilam Gilu, Julu, like a Nilam Gilu. And then also Nyingmas have the Bardo Druk. And then in Bardo Druk, there's the Kewe Bardo, and there's the Nilam Bardo, and then the Gombe Bardo or Tingatinji Bardo, you know, the meditation Bardo. And these are the living ones. And then after death, there's the more famous Bardo, Chike Bardo, Punye Bardo, and Sipe Bardo. But in the Nilam Bardo is a very, very important one in the 6 Bardos, in the waking time, in the living time, you know. So, but they don't give such a clear training as you just gave from the Aryadeva tradition. So it's really interesting how Rinpoche brings together these things, although he did not address necessarily the Bardo Tudril that I know of. I don't know if Rinpoche referred to Bardo Tudril per se, the text itself, because I think it was a popular text in those days. So this is really excellent. Now I'm going to ask you another question. When you say the Lung practice, so that's for the Neljoban, you had your 3 methods. The strong, the Lung, the use of the energies, energy yoga, like Sogzin La Sokba, right? Sogzel, we practice, right? Like Sogzel. And then you had the strong aspiration, Mulam, and then you have the Lameka, or the Lame Mengak, or Damgak. So, and then in regard to the Lung, you told a story about from biography of Jankyar Rowe Dorje, right? And I didn't know that one. That's so interesting. And is that in the Tugen Lama's Namtar? Right? Tugen Lama, I think, wrote an Namtar there. And he says that Jankyar Rowe Dorje developed a dream body by doing Lung Sogzel Keva Chavres, and the Tende Nilamke Lut Tende Kevres, and this Umbrava. Is that what you meant? Yeah. So I didn't know that, but that's really interesting. But did did he write a book about that? I only know Rowe Dorje's, you know, Tamgun Ngame Ngunzen very strongly. I like that very much. Samotenjo with Denjin Ngotsar. Jemper Tabel Lama, Karme Korne de Ningu Shukshi, Kangren Toljung 6 from Mao. I can only remember those 4 lines. But I used to know that one by heart. I really like that one. But I didn't know, did he also write a book about the Lung Jaya? That's all like that.
아니 기실라 탄다 덴마 코리아 가나도 배 냉가침부터 토지치 라바도 타는 거랑 좀 밀음기 리심 걸이야 아니지 슝도 과과 유매 아니 디인도 좀 어떤냐 탄데 센딥 잡지다 주어지 유스 센딥들이야 디지름치기 링무세준 강 돈도 나르추루기 이집숨데 잡이 열봤어 디날이야 아니 밀음기 귤루 걸이야 송요레스 저도 계실라 텐데 시 기레스타 귤루 데 밀음스 줘봐 디가냐 땅라란주야 파르도급이야 개월 파르도 아니 딩즈기 파르도 밀음기 파르도 손도 야 디급이야 밀음기 파르도 나냐 야 귤루도 저와 입직 송요레스 데네디 배지 나는 상하 닝면나야 야디 양수 연구레스 이 파르도 퇴르 다도서 거규도 전ali 요레 간다지 나란주 세베급을 데네 밀음급 tinday indu zamba yanjik pardoyoji ki kwalya tunanamin dinalya milumgi pardosunya tanya chungu tati jiramuchi dinalya yume shibri shuwe me kanda pardoda jawa yuebe kabla milumdi tinday yungu dos ani tatanda lungi nenjo tangi sonswa ngaranzo jiki lunglia tencheche ani milumgi lujuk ani dudu tenbe chutulya chawa tiyalya peti jangi rubedoji sonsons 디인도 잠바 장기 루베도지게 단대 소양이 슝디 투겐기 제베 잠도 루베도지 남다르베스 대신지기 장기 루베도지 크라이네리 양 투겐 콘조기 롱기 냠니 지당도 딘데가야 차비든데 두게스 크라이게 단대 디 투겐기 단대 제베 장기 루베도지 남다디 제종송도 네 디고를 믹스 토나마 종송
기실라기 레마게냐 게지 카메시 choice
No, less.
It's 8:15. We have another 15 minutes, but probably we
Oh,
should
right,
extend
right.
it a little bit longer. So what I
Okay.
mentioned before Gishila,
guess,
after Gishila responds, probably I'll open up for question and answers.
Yeah, sure. Can I just ask one more short question to Gisela? She
Sure.
mentioned one lady, Amala, one mother who had a dream about a mountain and a lake. Whose mother was that? I just was curious.
저기
That's a quick question.
아말라지기 아니 밀음고 류일텐제 사지 멍고 페브스물 봐. 디 수레스물 니코랑 양게슈 디 처저니 처주상 저니
사트군 조니르게 아말라레스.
처주 the journey chimo of the 처주 family and his mother. That's like the journey chimo is assistant. So I think the 처주 좀 그런 거 journey.
고랑긴 조니르게 아말라.
Oh, yes. The professor, you remember the Chadu Rinpoche, the previous one. Chadu Rinpoche, Chadu Rinpoche. He
Okay.
he died
Rinpoche's
in
mother,
1960s.
Okay.
Chadu Rinpoche.
Okay.
And
Okay.
he's
Thank you,
a-
Gisela. And then you said Kalu Rinpoche helped His Holiness Kalu Rinpoche with the instructions about the dream body. The previous Kalu Rinpoche, is that right? I just want to make sure I heard that right. I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
얘네디 Kalu Rinpoche기 Kalu Rinpochelia 다는 안도 밀음기 꼴리아도 제 가면남 소수 디덴버를 배웠던 소야.
어디덴버레스 대저르무치레 슈체 저르무치기 아그 셰르장소기 성완디 제조기 가치기 능라 아니 단다 갈루rumbu치기 코르테탄 사트가 아말라기 말람가 코르트조 송체 아니 말람기 리 차퍼젠치 로스 토야요바치 아니 ngmak logi nangla tola ani tangsan chije it khala tindi yungyobatas te chari ta tani ta she tang thbaine yahodus je lam tana dos.
Yes, so this conversation basically took place between His Holiness and the Kalu Rinpoche, the previous Kalu Rinpoche.
Yes.
His Holiness gave a teaching on the true stage of the Guya Samaja. This is a commentary by Akushirab Gyazo of the Labra, the Akushirab Gyazo Sound Dubagi Gyazo. In that teaching, His Holiness reported both examples, and he found that we can establish a separate identity, like the dream body, which is separate from our ordinary experiences. And we should discuss this with the scientists and see whether this can be observed or do further research.
Yes, yes. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. So let's say, well, please open to the general people.
Sure.
Thank you.
Again, thank you so much, Gisela, Bobla, Tenzla. Thank you. What you said is so profound, so deep, but also, Bobla, as you said, I mean, it's so meaningful and relevant to our life, to bring meaning to our life. Yeah, it's like,
Yes.
and so if folks have any questions, just raise your hand. Otherwise, I think Gisela and Bobla have so much more to share, but I thought I'll pause.
Yes, yes. Please open to the question if anybody has. Absolutely.
I'm struck by some parallels between classical Freudian psychoanalysis and some of these techniques. For example, the guru influencing dream. In analysis, there is this trust with the analyst, called transference, and a heightened suggestibility between the therapist and the patient. And so do you see parallels in early Western psychiatry? And this is the 20s and the 30s, and some of the comments that were made tonight.
Bobla, go ahead. Bobla, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, maybe I should take that. But then please translate the answer to Rinpoche. So, Geshe Rinpoche. So what I'm saying, that's a very good question, extremely good. And what is very interesting about it is that the unconscious, if we consider that in the Western thing to be kind of the discovery of Freud, but the difference, this is discovered ancient time by the inner scientists of India and Tibet. And for example, Freud would have flipped out, and I think somehow Jung didn't really notice that. Jung was aware of the so-called Tibetan Book of the Dead in an early translation by Evans Wentz, but he didn't really notice that in the Book of the Dead, there is the presentation of the Oedipal complex and the Electra complex, in the sense that, according to the Book of the Dead, which also is there in the Indian Buddhist Abhidharma, what they call, or the sort of scientific organizing of the Buddhist teaching in India, that the super subtle body-mind of the native who is being born in human parents, who brings their own sort of what you can only call something like a mental gene to join the two genes of the chromosomes of mother and father, so that the conception is a triple union, not a double union only. But if that being reborn is gravitating toward being male in the coming life, they are lusting for the mother and they're jealous and competitive with the father. And if they're tending toward a female in the next life, they are lusting for the father and jealous and competitive of the mother. So what Freud discovered as the Electra and Oedipal complex is very foundational in the unconscious theory of Freud, is already there in these early studies of rebirth process by the Buddhists. And Buddhist what they call themselves inner scientists, Adhyatma Vidya in Sanskrit, or Nangirikpa in Tibet. But the difference is, and therefore all of these things about the dream being so important, because of the dream being the way to learn how to navigate the death and rebirth transition, is the Buddhist reason for making the dream so important. And it certainly is the discovery. And Rinpoche mentioned, by the way, that the subtle mind that goes along with the channels, winds, and drops, the subtle mind is the afflictions, he said, which he means they have a list of 80 instincts, which are instinctual impulses in the mind, and they are encoded in 3 different kinds of subtle mental states, which is too complicated to explain just now, but that's what their idea was. But the Buddhist idea is, once having themselves long ago having discovered the unconscious, is that the challenge for the human being, and therefore, in a way, ultimately, the challenge for therapy, which is what a yogi is going through with a teacher and or even on their own or with a teacher or whoever it is to become conscious of the unconscious, completely so. So there is no unconscious or involuntary impulses in their own inner structure, you could say, their subtle mind structure any longer. So that therefore they are confident in moving into another life, that they will only have a place they want to go to rather than being dragged by impulses of lust or fear or hate or this sort of thing. And whereas Freud's theory was that the unconscious has to remain unconscious, and you only want to overdo, you want to overcome any kind of excessive repression or distortion, and sort of vent some degree of it and then sublimate it and so on. So, but that it always remains like an unconscious mechanism, because Freud was trying to fit his system into a materialist scientific paradigm to be accepted by scientists, and because that's the thing. So actually, the Buddhist psychology, modern psychotherapy meeting, which is very critical for all of civilization, even for that meeting to work, the Buddhist one has to be seen as a psychological science thing, not just some religious thing. Okay, how is that okay?
Thank you, Bob. While you were speaking, I was translating to Geshe-la. So any other questions? Maybe I'll ask one question to Geshe-la. Geshe-la, for those of us who have not studied a lot on Buddhism or not practiced a lot, what would be some simple practices how we could use get in touch with a more subtle level of consciousness and use a dream towards a spiritual practice? Islam onzo nangche go nyamnyo shida mekyo zorwa ani jida onzo sem chawa jorwa na milam di nganzo ki milam di cheda ani je khandesh ne onzo ki simje thamje la pentoya ki onzo nilam de khandesh tuje tang tumres ani gewa thon ne ga jorwa ine jida onzo nyamnyo shida mekyo zorla deje
La so ni di len di katima shukong la ni di chi shugo sam. Long sim chamu gen ro tang ge gangsa chi ni gangsa niwa phar ro tang di par na ta la pa ya chi wa. Da ku zo sim chi chi de ni la pa ya pe na ni jong la pa ya ta serang ma la pa ya ta yang na mi chi shi cha wi ji la mi xian da ji la pa shu ji di ge ja pa shu zhong chan yin gi mi di gi gay jabia tang ni tsa goya tang yang dinti ni ma shi ju pensen la pa cha choya dinti gi ni tang dinti tende nga su roba chi go mari chi je gi mi ri na la yang yong gu yo res di gi gari chung go res na along sim chamu zang gi gangsa ni wa ji gangsa xian ji la phoya liu xian da la phoya dinti yo ba yang sam lo tang ya chi dos ti chi res Tini ta malangi li di pechue tang ni parna ji choten tang tsugu thola pa pechue tang ya ti khar resa na anyi ten rukha la khala ani ji malam yawo tang ya la gomshi jang ya right so ji zhonang yo nying gi zhou zhou mo den ji la tu ya yang sa cha cha sa den ji la zhou ya da yang na ji ku gar su na so gang la ga ya gi ni tsa den ji malam tang ya gi yang Tende pa ji gomshi da jagba ina lakbar da yang ji giba dhubya ji warwa mi la ji ropa ji ya ani mi garla ropa ji ya tsoba la ropa ji ya ani mi rigi tang jakab ta kari ina chesa tende la ropa ji ya gang tar ji gisim chabar ji
Geshe-la.
long la
Hello. Geshe-la.
oh hala
Please give
tende
data.
gomshi ji malam ji pa to se kyang thoba ina
Translator.
ani malam to ngo shi thoni choten yo ya
Do you have some data?
Ingores.
Oh, please do give them. And if you could give Geshe-la a copy
So before I answer the question, I wanted to mention
the
when we
translation.
talk about the subtle body and the mind,
And even
which suggests a separate identity from your current body, right? One interesting thing that we can observe,
I don't know if you
both
can find
among
them.
the Tibetan traditions as well as the non-Tibetan
Those are
traditions,
copies
this
of the
experience
wisdom
of
book.
going
Maybe
into trance.
you don't have copies.
For the Tibetans,
Find the
you have
brilliantly
oracles.
illuminated lamp.
So this is basically inviting another self, another entity
Just as
into
a
the
good Lord
body
just
of
give it to
who
you.
was
Here's a
totally
English
separate identity, right?
what it is.
And
That was
going
great.
into trance is not
Please
unique
give them each a
and
Kodak, okay?
localized among the
Thank you.
Tibetan
Thank you.
tradition.
Just a change.
You find this among non-Tibetans as well. So this, and how people can transmit from one location, I'm talking about biologically, to another is through these subtle experiences, such as a dream. So that's something we need to do further work, but I feel there's connection between the experiences of the oracles and the trance and the dream body. There's a connection for that. And then getting back to question about how we can utilize for beginners a dream as something to either experience or promote our spiritual practices. Yes, there are the instructions given. One of the core practices seems like really creating intention, cultivating intention before you go to sleep. Really have some kind of a purpose for your dream, like creating intention. You really wanted to help others, wanted to maintain your health, and so on, and constantly creating that intention before going to bed. And then some of that realizes in your kind of dream experiences, especially when you're engaging in the cultivation of a virtual state or the intention. And that also enable your dream and that experience become virtuous throughout the sleeping stage. And especially, thinking positively, like cultivating intentions for your health, well-being, and so on. And then through that, and if you fall asleep, that experience itself will become part of the healing as well.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
So I think we're out of time. Is that correct, Sewala?
Just for one more question, and then Gisela and Bobla will give you opportunity to make some closing remarks. But there's one question left. Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay.
Hi, thank you very much for the lecture and for asking the questions. A question which came to my mind: if you develop a dream body, can you act from it within your from normal life? So, for example, if you develop your dream body, can you talk to us from it and maybe have a transmission like that or something? Thank you.
The kede milam ki lu mungu topsuna lu dil ten cheje ani 지금 아주 미패벌이야 저 깨지셔야다 지금 저 거드져야 되게 답시 여러베스
어디는 거리 디 용기 요레스 바나다 말람기 nenjurla 때니 말람기 차버전 지금 먼저 정바이나 아니 디 토네다 지속내지는 시와다 지와다 와나 잡벨리시 가리 드바이나야 드비아 요바치 차가요레스 디 마이바야 말람기 리 텐다오 지금 먼저 정바이나 일 타랑 동라 마티위 니츠마보지 드트위야다 아니 니츠 가리나 지 드트위야게 니츠 용구요레스 배치 전부 용구요레스 아지
깨지셔야 좋으레스
깨지셔 트요레스 다바나 말람기 리 니와지 원도 저서나 그 템보 말람다 ng오시니 아니 말람기 리 니와지 정소이나 디토니다 지 갈스고네 지니 따위 리지기 아니 바로볼라 깨제셔야라 소파틴디게 니세 용구요레 비잖아 그 시험장소 송가당라 틴티진도 스파나타 알레 니로송아 가서 남지시기도 알레 니로제 티 말람기 리타비 미 리지랑니 밀리 알루 알바다 코 세랑 버와 코 니로 차비 지라 아니 물음기 리스타비 아니 지테 메이크 밀리지 렌제 아니 뜻진다 밀리가 차창 바딘디 용구 여러바스 데데 베 마보송야 여 자갈라 여레 볼라케 제딘디 여레 다 데난 신기 아니 가서 물음기 리니와치도 렘바이나 원데 저라이나 디토네 아니 리도 나서도 특별히 용구 여레스 now
yes, it seems possible, especially for the dream yogi practitioners. Through the dream body, the practitioners are able to, continue their practices, doing peaceful and wrathful activities. And also one of the unique aspects of the dream body is the distance. The physical and the geographical distance is no longer relevant. And you're beyond kind of a time and location. And so another example, directly getting back to you, is the great Akushira Gyazo. This is a great tantric teacher from the Labra monastery. In his teaching, he mentioned when the Nagas, or the Nagas, when they go to sleep, they're like a spirit, the Nagas. And then there are some of these who practice in dream body mind, the Nagas, were actually taking the human birth or establishing human body and mind, and then doing a lot of things. And this experience is, there's some examples both from India and Tibet, where the non-humans are utilizing the dream body and to construct the human body and engaging with the human beings. And they were mentioned in the teaching.
That's really great. Wonderful.
Thank you very much. Barbara, I'm going to invite you to make concluding remarks. But first, I'll invite Geshe-la to succinctly, if there's any concluding remarks.
Well, I telephoned to Tashi Tse-ring-la to offer Geshe-la and the translator a kadak from Tibet House, and also to offer Geshe-la a copy of the Rimga Sedran in English, if he can find it, which I think they should have there in the bookstore.
Yep, and
I would like him to do that. And I'm very thankful to Geshe-la for coming and sharing his knowledge and his extremely creative, I think, thought on this topic. Oh, good. Oh, that's Ganden is doing that. That's our Ganden.
There's going to be a
Thank you. Okay. And then also to the translator, please also.
Oh yeah.
Thank you for doing such a great job.
Thank you.
Yes.
And thank you so much.
Thank
you. One to him. Yes, give him one. Thank you, Ganden. Thank you. Very nice.
If you could just say a few closing remarks, Geshe-la juktum intoje kame tiktik nismana.
Tuchena tira ani ta gonda chenlare te ina yang ta ngazu loban chemo thamen la dus talam ni je ngi se ti cha chembu tang ni dus ngi se je ji chong ba tang ta tamshe nyam te je ya khabar ta khungi ni simji ke thela lamtun ya mangbo phe song la dongcha ya mangbo phe song den za ani tuji chis 需要知道，你对能现在不肯听跟着，个的人是当然，那么在全部定的，可是，都是讲说，你国家都是那么，对了推起来的，你原来都是在这能解决我了，你到底，阿里了国家个搞了，你在全部定那么，你推起来你需要的，你，我说跟等这个了，用沙塔让帮你都是今年你个，送酒那样的。Tila tuji chisa ki yinsi ta tatu ani ngasu di karsa nga thongo chim thomen la ani tari chalam ni ma ton je yo mari te ni ngisi ya ge ani pe te riwa shi chenbu yes an charang du sta loji chatang sabi chaningi mangbo gugu yores, jawar muchila thungji sabo, thabar da nga su naling di chi ji chi dang, thabar da po ki chi dang shi xiong, mirik dendun tabzo, ane xio mangbo jila ropa nga rila, dunya rangbo du si ji onde, ane ngarang tawi dawa gilong ji mayimba, aso po mimangi sem nangla, jiko cawu de yores. Ane di indi, ane ngi si ji je tuna sam dawa ji. O dindi ane riba US, ane gangta charang tuma di zo za chenpo tangche, ane di rang duksi jaba de gabu chungla tuji chis shugi yins, yang jabi molum US.
So tonight it's getting really dark and late, but again, all of us had this incredible opportunity, and thank you all for coming. Especially, I wanted to thank Professor Thurman. Although we're only meeting through the Zoom, but still very happy. I'm extremely delighted having this opportunity to discuss with you, and you already provided me some very useful feedback and guidance for my research. I'm really grateful. Before our discussion here, I had a really interesting chat and very helpful discussion with Ganden Thurman, and the Ganden provided a really good insight about what the Western scientists are looking for and what they're scared of, they're avoiding. And these really, the discussions opened my eye in terms of how we can approach our research and make it accessible to non-Tibetans. So thank you so much. And then our coordinator here also provided a very useful service, enormous help. Thank you so much. And I pray that we will have more opportunities in the future to engage this kind of discussion. And I really hope next time to see Professor Thurman in person and in flesh. We heard so much about you, and we know that you are incredibly dedicated for the Tibetan promotion of the Tibetan culture. You are very close to His Holiness, who had a huge, aspiration as well as rejoice all this wonderful work that you're doing for the Tibetan people. And so next time, I hope to see you in flesh and have more discussions. And then I want to thank everyone here tonight being with us and sharing your thinking. And thank you for the coordinators, people who are providing the dinner and the sound and everyone. So thank you all.
Thank you, Geshe-la. Can I ask one last question? How long are you staying here in New York? Will you be here still for a while?
I'll be here for another 4 days and then leaving for India.
Oh, another 40, then back to India. I see. Okay. Well, I hope to meet you again. And then in India, where are you staying? Are you back in Balakupe?
I'm at the private office in Dharamsala.
Oh, you're in Dharamsala. Oh, good.
Yes.
I hope to come there next spring.
I'm doing editing and approving His Holiness, collected works. So.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I hope to visit you there then next spring in April. Indat Shiva. Indat Shiva nala jargon. Yanja Dharamsala, yeah.
Oh, they got into cheese.
And it did Jega Shungo. And it didn't Jema to take with Gonda.
Please don't worry.
And you get
the connection
Gela
to
Amdo Iba. Gela Amdo ne Chungura. Gela Amdo.
Long.
In a UK, but the love what the Abusu Shagore. Amdo get the Sungo Marva.
Amdo Keta, Ani, ich can dream of it, that Carson. Conchella lo Chutuche, Ani Serala lo Chutuchini, no Picatarva.
Lawless. Amdo the Cavasilla. Tojiche. The Caliperona, Jagalia. Pay out. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Tojiche. And great translating, by the way.
Thank you, Professor.
Wonderful job. Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Tsewangla.
Indeed. Thank you,
to
Bob.
share,
Love.